Welcome in, everybody, to the PNR Show. As always, I'm your host, Paul Lynch of Rothrock, and today we've got a great one reacting to the college football playoff semifinals. We had Miami and Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, and then Indiana and Oregon in what was a dominant fashion and a dominant showing from the Hoosiers. We'll react to those games, but before we do, go ahead and follow us, rate and review us on Spotify. That'd be greatly appreciated. And then on YouTube, subscribe. We also have an Instagram. That's at the PNR Show. At the PNR Show. You can repost our post on there. Follow us on there. And then we'll start to get on TikTok and Apple Podcasts as well. But go ahead and share this with your friends and family and get this podcast out there. That'd be greatly appreciated. Let's get into it, though. Miami 31, Ole Miss 27 in the Sugar Bowl. Instant classic. This is college football. This is what we think about when we talk about college football and the expanded playoffs and the new generation, the new era. This is it right here. I mean, the Hurricanes and the Rebels going at it in the semifinals. The winner going to the national championship. Are you kidding me? Like, gone are the days of Alabama and the SEC and that's all the national championship is. No. It's expanded. It's expanded, and it has leveled the playing field. The Hurricanes survive the Ole Miss Rebels. Instant classic. This was a great game. And really, Miami outplayed Ole Miss this whole entire game. They controlled the clock. They took care of the football. They got after Trinidad Chambliss. They contained him. He only had one touchdown in this game and only completed 62% of his passes. It wasn't like the dominant fashion and the dominant showing that we saw against Georgia for Trinidad Chambliss. This was a great job by Miami of containing him, and that's what they needed to do in order to win this game. That was the whole entire talk, and I talked about this before the game, but they had to control Trinidad Chambliss because when he gets hot, he gets hot. Mark Fletcher had 22 carries for 133 yards in this game. He continues to be dominant. Miami continues to be able to run the ball. That's what Mario Cristobal wants to do. He's an O-line coach, and he wants to control the line of scrimmage and run the ball, and they did it well again. But even though Miami outplayed Ole Miss, they had 22 more plays, completed 2 more first downs. Ole Miss only completed 2 first downs in this game. I believe they were 2 for 11. Miami completely outplayed them, but what happened? Ole Miss lingered. Ole Miss hung around. They just continued to fight and fight. Miami had 4 dropped picks in this game. They had the missed field goal that was wide right. And you're just thinking, entering the fourth quarter, like, is Miami about to Miami this game? Is Miami about to have another blunder late in the season? Think about what Mario Cristobal and Miami have done in the past seasons. They have fumbled the ball, literally and figuratively. Like, they have had excellent chances to make playoff runs and to go to the national championship, whatever. Last year with Cam Ward, they should have been in the playoffs. But they missed it. Why? Because late in the season, they just continue to crumble. And so this season, it's been a little different. In November, they played well against Pitt. They played, obviously, great against Texas A&M and against Ohio State. And so you're starting to think, okay, maybe Miami has, turned a new leaf. They've turned this around. Mario Cristobal can win the big games. He can sustain his team late into the season. We're into January now. But then Ole Miss continues to hang around, and Trinidad Chambliss is starting to make some plays. Kewan Lacey is running the ball well, right? Miami struggled in the red zone in this game. They let up 4 sacks. 4 sacks. And so the end of the game, Ole Miss is thinking, we've got this in the bag. As long as we have Trinidad Chambliss, we've got this. By the way, this is how they beat Georgia. Speaking of Ole Miss, remember Georgia had the lead, right? And then Ole Miss just hangs around. They hang around. And what does Trinidad Chambliss do? Well, he continues to scramble. He continues to make plays. And then he eventually wins them the football game. Well, the same happened in this one. The same thing happened. One of the last drives of the game and an instant classic in the fourth quarter. Well, Trinidad Chambliss, he got the ball and he drove his team right down the field. Right down the field. I mean, it looked easy. He was completing passes. He was running the ball. And then he throws it to his tight end for a touchdown, and Ole Miss goes up. But then here comes Carson Beck. Here comes the man that is in his fifth year in college football. Here comes the man that has been written off so many times. You know, even Miami fans themselves have talked about Carson Beck is just Carson Beck. Carson Beck isn't going to be the guy to win them the game. Carson Beck isn't going to be the guy to go out and be the star. He just has to take care of the football. He just has to be not Carson Beck. What did Carson Beck do? He drove his team right down the field in less than 3 minutes and won them the football game. I mean, that final drive from Carson Beck was one of the best I've ever seen. You talk about a game-winning drive. That's how you orchestrate it, man. He was hitting the defense on the in cuts. He was throwing it to the outside. He was taking off. Trinidad Chambliss had one heck of a drive. I mean, Carson Beck's was just unbelievable. And this is a man who so many times in his career, his college career, has not looked the best. Let's be honest. Especially this season. You know, there were 2 games against Louisville and SMU where he had, a combined 6 interceptions, and they lost both of those games. But he comes and he was efficient in that final drive. And, you know, after the game in the presser, he said that what he said to his team was that this is what they came to Miami for. This is what they were there for. These are the moments that they live for. And that's what a leader of men does. That's what a leader does. Carson Beck, hate him or love him, he is a leader. And he is the leader of the Miami Hurricanes, who are now in the national championship game. Listen, I wrote Carson Beck off. I did. Every single game in the playoffs, I thought, you know, Carson Beck's going to Carson Beck it, man. He's going to throw multiple picks, and he's not going to be himself, and, you know, he's going to struggle, whatever. Then they beat Texas A&M. And, you know, they play Ohio State, and we're like, okay, it's Ohio State. He's going to make mistakes. You know, he's going to mess it up. And then he goes and he plays one of the best games of his life and beats the Buckeyes. And now they come in and play Ole Miss, and we're thinking, okay. Like, let's be honest. Like, 3 games in a row, like, something's going to happen. He's just got to not Carson Beck it. Well, he Carson Becked it. And what does Carson Beck do? He wins. He wins. You know, like it or not, this is one of the most winningest quarterbacks in college football history. Now, granted, some of that is as a backup. Some of that's as a backup. But last year at Georgia, he only lost 2 games as a starter. Remember, Stetson Bennett was the quarterback in the playoffs. Last year, Georgia had the most drops in college football. That's not his fault. The year before, they had an excellent season with Carson Beck at the helm. He played great. And so, I think Carson Beck gets a really bad rap on him. Why? Because he has some bad games, but man, he has some good games. He has some good games, and that fourth quarter, that final drive shows exactly what I mean. Let's talk about the final play where Carson Beck ran it in for the touchdown. This was, to me, the fatal mistake for Ole Miss and Pete Golding. Pete Golding has done an incredible job with Ole Miss. He's done an incredible job with the team and calling plays defensively. But listen, that's a bad call on 3rd and goal. Bad call. They get a stop on 1st and goal. 2nd and goal, they get another stop. And I believe it's 3rd and goal, right? But then what Ole Miss calls defensively, they call a cover 2 man with only 4 people rushing the passer. And Carson Beck eventually runs it in. See, to me, a bad call. Bad call defensively. See, when you're in the red zone, and specifically goal to go, everything condenses. Everything condenses. So routes are harder to run because they've got to be shorter. Running is harder because the defense is right in front of your face. Everything is harder. But a cover two man, what that is you're playing man, you have four guys rushing the passer, and then you have two deep safeties. Well, here's the thing about red zone defense and specifically goal to go. You don't need two deep safeties, especially with cover two man. If you're going to have a deep safety, you better run cover one. You better have a guy who's in the middle of the field kind of robbing these routes, stopping these routes in the middle of the field. You better have a guy who has eyes on Carson Beck. You better have someone with eyes on Carson Beck. Like, he had been killing them all game running the football. And what does he do? He runs it in. One of the final plays of the game. They've got to have someone with eyes on the quarterback. And again, to only rush 4, you're going to let him sit back all day in the pocket on 3rd and goal, chance to go to the national championship, and you're just going to let him sit back in the pocket. You're not going to bring an extra blitzer. You're not going to have someone rob the routes in the middle of the field. You're just going to play a conservative cover 2 man. And so what happens? Everyone runs their route, and he has all day in the pocket, and then everyone goes to the right. And where does Carson Beck go? He goes to the left. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes, and he waltzes into the end zone. Listen, credit to Pete Golding, but when you have goal to go, you've got to either get immense pressure on the quarterback, make him make a quick decision, instant decision, because he doesn't have time. And guess what? When you bring that blitz, people are in the receivers' faces. The DBs and linebackers are in the receivers' faces. So he doesn't have time. He doesn't have time, and he doesn't have space to throw that ball. It's got to be a tight window throw. So you've got to bring some type of pressure on that. And if you're not going to bring pressure, at least play cover 1 with someone on the eyes of the quarterback as a runner. The thing about man coverage, specifically cover 2 man, is that's a really easy coverage for quarterbacks to run against. Because think about it, all of the routes, they're running down the field and each defender has their man. Well, no one has the eyes on the quarterback. When you have zone, your job defensively is to have eyes on the quarterback. When you're in man, no one has eyes on the quarterback unless you have a cover 1 man. Well, no cover 1 on that play. That's enough about that play. I thought Carson Beck did an incredible job of being patient and a great job of running it when he needed to. And again, credit to Carson Beck. He was incredible on the final drive. Malachi Toney was really good as well. He's been great for them all season long, just 17 years old. He's done good blocking, catching. He's a great player, and he's going to be probably a Miami legend. Specifically, if they win the national championship, certainly he will be. And so, Ole Miss gets the ball with 17 seconds to go, or about, 17 seconds to go, and Trinidad Chambliss completes 2 incredible passes, back-to-back, and they have a shot. They're at about the 35-yard line, and they, haul it to the end zone. And it was a great throw by Trinidad Chambliss back of the end zone and a controversial play. The question is, was it pass interference on that final throw? I'm one of the guys that believes when you have a Hail Mary, there's going to be contact regardless. Unless it's egregious, you can't call it. You can't call it. Now, would I have been mad if there was a flag on that play? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think there was some contact, but to me it looked like it was from both sides. And so I think if you're Ole Miss, you can live with that. You can live with that. And let's just say this. Miami, you can no longer complain about the 2002 national championship. You can't complain about that anymore. 1, because you're in the national championship now. 2, because you didn't get the call then and you get the call now. Okay, it's even. It's even. So I personally didn't think it was pass interference. Ole Miss fans are going to run that to death, and they think it was pass interference. Should have stopped Carson Beck on the last drive, is what it is. Credit to Pete Golding. Pete Golding, I mean, the job that he did with this team when Lane Kiffin left them and he has to take over, end of the season as they're going into the playoffs. And not only that, but he wins 2 playoff games. He beats Georgia. Really a thorn in their side. He's done incredible. And he's going to continue to be the head coach for the Ole Miss Rebels. And rightfully so. Rightfully so. He's an incredible coach. And, credit to him. Credit more to Trinidad Chambliss and all the players on the Ole Miss team. Listen, when a head coach leaves like Lane Kiffin did, when the leader that you committed to leaves you like that, you've got to band together. Someone's got to go in that locker room and say, who cares what these coaches are doing? Who cares? We're going to go out and win these games. We're not going to let Lane Kiffin affect us. And that's exactly what they did. Whether you like it or not, the quarterback is the leader of football teams. Because the head coach can say as much as they want, but guess what? The head coach isn't the one playing. The quarterback is the one who holds the ball every single snap. The quarterback is the leader of that football team. And Trinidad Chambliss, he's an incredible leader. Speaking of Trinidad, he applied for a 6th year of eligibility and he got denied by the NCAA. To me, it doesn't really make sense why they deny it. They've, if you don't know, Trinidad Chambliss, he got hurt with some type of, I believe it was a disease or something like that a couple years back. And typically, that's a medical redshirt, right? Typically, you get that year redshirted. Well, they haven't granted that to Trinidad Chambliss, and he's looking to get that medical redshirt so he can play another year. And I hope the NCAA eventually does repeal their decision. Ole Miss will look to repeal it. And if they do, he'll come back to Oxford for next year, and he'll be even better than he was this year because he's an incredible quarterback. I wish we got to see him throughout the whole entire year because when he came in for Ole Miss, it was instantaneous, and he was a Heisman caliber quarterback. And if he played the whole year, he might have won the Heisman. Seriously, he was that good, and he was the frontal point of the Ole Miss offense. So credit to him. And if he doesn't get his 6th year of eligibility, I'll just say this. He can be an NFL quarterback. He's a little bit on the smaller side, but his arm is incredible. His playmaking ability, to me, is the biggest thing. He can run around, he can make plays, and he's very smart. That's something that people underestimate with him. He is very smart. He makes the right throws. He rarely turns the ball over, specifically with how he's been in the latter half of the season. And then he can run. He can run, man. He's fast. He is sneaky. He is so athletic. Played baseball in high school. So has that sort of shortstop mentality where he can just fire the ball. He's a great quarterback, and I don't think he's necessarily a top 10 guy or maybe not even a first-round guy, but he can certainly come in and, be under a veteran quarterback, learn, and then he can play. He can be your franchise guy, no doubt. He reminds me a lot of Kyler Murray, maybe not as dominant as Kyler Murray was, but certainly within one season, Trinidad Chambliss was about as dominant as Kyler Murray was, So Trinidad Chambliss, best of luck to you. Whether or not you get another year of eligibility, you are stamped in college football. As for Miami, they found a way to win this game, but they've got to play better in the national championship game. I'll say that. Carson Beck, he attempted 37 passes, and that's not the game that Mario Cristobal wants to play. He wants to run the ball. They ran the ball fine. They ran the ball actually well. But they've got to be a little bit more efficient. They've got to have less penalties. Remember, they let up 4 sacks to the Ole Miss defensive line, who is not necessarily an elite defensive line. And Indiana is. They had 4 dropped picks. Listen, against Indiana, you gotta catch those. Because Indiana's not going to make mistakes. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. They won't make mistakes. They won't give the ball up. And so if they do, you gotta take advantage. And you can't miss a field goal, certainly not. So Miami, they have to clean up those little things. I think it's going to be a close game, unlike other people are saying, but they've got to play the best game of their lives. That one will be at home in Miami, in Hard Rock. It'll probably be about 60-40 Miami fans, but can't wait for that one. But Miami is moving on to the national championship game where they'll face the Indiana Hoosiers. Speaking of the Hoosiers, how about that performance in the playoffs, in the semifinals? Indiana 56, Oregon 22. Unbelievable. And it was really 56-15 because Oregon scored late. I mean, Indiana was firing on all cylinders from the very first play of the game. First play of the game, Oregon's Dante Moore throws a pick six to D'Angelo Pons. And from that moment on, you just knew there was no chance. Oregon had zero chance from that moment on, because if you give Indiana anything, if you make a mistake, if you turn the ball over, if you give them any type of momentum, it's wraps. I mean, they are suffocating. They are like a snake that just surrounds you and keeps on squeezing, and it is impossible to break free. This team is 15-0 now, and they have a chance to go 16-0 and what will be the first 16-0 team ever. And they have a good possibility of doing it. Fernando Mendoza was incredible. 17 of 20, 177 yards, but get this, 5 touchdowns. He had more touchdowns than he had incompletions. That is incredible. I mean, think about how hard that is to do. You pass the ball 20 times in a game, you incomplete it 3 times, but 5 touchdowns. Mind you, he didn't even play the whole game. This Indiana team is so good that they don't have to throw the ball 30, 40 times like these other teams do, because they can just run it down your throats, and they can score touchdowns any way. They can score touchdowns through the run. They can score touchdowns passing the ball. They can score touchdowns, guess what, on defense, like they did the first play of the game. Dante Moore, listen, he had a fine game. He played well. Besides the pick six, he had 285 yards and 2 touchdowns. But if you give Indiana the ball, if you give them that type of momentum, you just have no chance. No chance. And credit to Indiana fans for traveling. I mean, they traveled well, and they were loud in that place. I mean, you could see it on the TV as soon as they scored that beer flying in the air, just drinks everywhere, food all over the ground. It was unbelievable. That place was loud. You could tell from the TV, and Indiana will surely travel well to Miami. I said it, not too long ago, but I think it'll be about 60-40 Miami fans in the national championship game. I mean, to have 40% of the stadium filled would be, just very, very impressive for Indiana. They have traveled well all year, and they deserve it. This has been one of the best fan bases in all of college football. They have stuck with their team, even though they were 2-10 just a couple years ago. 2-10. I want to think about that and talk about that turnaround for a second. In my opinion, there has never been a turnaround in sports, and specifically in college football, as quick as this one. You start to think about, when Nick Saban took over Alabama, but Alabama was a powerhouse back in the Bear Bryant days, right? You think about maybe Nebraska had quick turnarounds. There's maybe LSU with Nick Saban, maybe Georgia. But even Georgia, they were not as bad as Indiana. The Indiana Hoosiers, before this year, were the losingest team in college football history. History of all time, they had the most losses and the worst winning percentage. And now they're in the national championship game, and they're going to be favored for the national championship game. And I'll say this. This is not a fluke. This is not a one-year thing. As long as Curt Cignetti is the head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers, they are contenders, certainly, for the national championship. Every single year, he does such a good job of teaching the fundamentals on his team. Both of his teams, even from the JMU and Elon days, they tackle well. They play the line of scrimmage. They don't commit a lot of penalties. They don't turn the ball over. Their quarterbacks are very smart. Curt Cignetti talked about how earlier in the year, Fernando Mendoza was a little bit raw in terms of a prospect. In terms of his footwork, he had stuff to work on. But what did he do? Well, he didn't just let him be, but he coached him. He brought in a quarterback coach to coach Fernando Mendoza and get him better on his timing and his footwork. Because here's the thing about the Indiana offense is it is all based on footwork. They run the RPOs and they run the RPOs very well. That's what they do. And so when you're running an RPO, it's got to be quick. It's got to be an instantaneous decision because run pass option, you're either handing it off, you're either taking off yourself, or you're firing a bullet in between the defense. So you've got to be smart mentally, but you've got to be quick. Your body has to be as quick as your mind is. And that's the thing about Fernando Mendoza. Like, he is, as much as he is smart, he is athletic and he is quick in terms of his body. He is, in terms of fundamentally, one of the most sound quarterbacks I've ever seen coming out of college. Like, you think about quarterbacks that have been able to fire passes from one hash to the opposite sideline, and quarterbacks that are so accurate on the deep ball that can make checks at the line. Like, there's not a lot that have ever been able to do it. Fernando Mendoza is one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen in college football. And there's a reason why he won the Heisman, and that's the reason. He reminds me a lot of Joe Burrow at LSU, just a quarterback that came in and in 1 year does incredible things and is accurate and has one heck of an arm and is sneaky athletic and can get the first down and is just a commander of the offense. To me, that's what Fernando Mendoza does best, and that's what Joe Burrow did best. Even though Joe Burrow was more of a gunslinger, he commanded the offense. And I think Fernando Mendoza can do what Joe Burrow did, and that's come into any franchise day one and command the offense. He should be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft, and if anyone says different, well, they're wrong. The Raiders need him. The Jets would need him. There are a lot of teams right now that would take Fernando Mendoza, as he is right now, over the current quarterback they have. I think there's probably about 5, maybe about 10 teams that will take Fernando Mendoza over the quarterback they have. That's how good he is. He can come in instantaneously. He is so good. Let's talk a little bit more about the game, right? I want to give credit to Oregon and Dan Lanning and specifically Dante Moore, because after they threw that pick six, they did a great job of coming back and being resilient. That's the thing that when I look at football teams, you got to be resilient, man. You got to be able to bounce back. And Oregon did that. They throw the pick six, and then the next drive, what do? Well, Dante Moore leads them right down the field for a touchdown in an incredible drive. It was a great one. And, really, the difference in that game was that pick six. And it was the short fields that they gave Indiana. Oregon just had way too many turnovers in this game. They had 2 fumbles. Dante Moore, they had where the running back hit Dante Moore on the RPO. That's another thing that I talk about with the RPO is it's so quick that just one thing goes wrong and it's a turnover. Well, they turn the ball over. They give Indiana the ball at the 10-yard line. Then they have another fumble where they give Indiana the ball on another short field. Those type of mistakes you cannot make against a team that's as good as Indiana. And Oregon did that. I think Dante Moore played a fine game. He played a fine game. The offense played fine. They outgained Indiana in terms of yards. But when you give Indiana 3 short fields and when you give them a pick six, you have no chance. And so, Dan Lanning, something has to change. Something has to change. I'll say this. He has not been at Oregon long. And so I think he's on the trajectory to winning a national championship. There's people who are going to say, oh, he can't win the big games. Oh, he's never going to win a natty. That's not true. Dan Lanning is still one of the best coaches in all of college football. He still is. And what he does in terms of motivating his players, in terms of recruiting, and in terms of building a team, building a roster, he's up there with the best in college football. He's one of the smartest minds and one of the great leaders of men that we've ever seen in college football. And so there's no reason to think that he won't win a national championship eventually. It just wasn't this year. Listen, last year they lost in the quarterfinals against a juggernaut, Ohio State, who went on to win the national championship after a bye. It happens. It happens. And then this year, well, what do? They win the quarterfinals against Texas Tech. And then they go to the semifinals and lose to Indiana, who will probably win the national championship. And so they're on the upward trajectory. Maybe next year they go to the national championship. Maybe they lose, or maybe they win. Maybe the year following that, they win the national championship. And so it takes time. Right? We've seen that early in guys' careers, it's never year one. It's never really year two. Even Nick Saban at LSU, it took him 3 years. Curt Cignetti, it took him, 2 years to get to the national championship. Ryan Day, one of the best coaches in college football, took him a numerous amount of years, about 6 years. So it takes time. And so what I'd say to Oregon fans, and what I'll continue to say, is to trust the process. Trust what Dan Lanning is doing. Trust what he does in the transfer portal and recruiting and the leader of men that he is, because he will eventually get one as long as he stays at Oregon. There's also, breaking news that just came out today as I'm recording this. Dylan Raiola committed to the Oregon Ducks. That's huge. And I'll talk about that a little bit on the Instagram. As I said earlier, follow that. But, man, he's the guy. Dylan Raiola, since he came into Nebraska, was really a guy who could make an impact right away. And he's young, but now he's kind of matured into that quarterback where this is his junior year, and this is the year for him, and he'll have the weapons around him. Guys will be coming back, Evan Stewart, other players like that, and he'll have the weapons around him. I have no doubt that Oregon will be right back in the playoffs next year, and that they might be the favorite to win the national championship next year. That's how good Dylan Raiola is. That's how good Dan Lanning is. And this offense and this defense specifically will be next year. That's something. They're going to lose some players. They're going to lose Dylan Thieneman. They're going to lose other veteran players on the defensive side. But, man, Dan Lanning, reloads. He reloads. He does a great job of every single year being competitive, and it starts with the quarterback, and Dylan Raiola will be the guy next year. And so with that being said, that's almost pretty much guaranteed that Dante Moore will enter the NFL draft. When talking about Dante Moore, I was one of the guys that said he should come back and play another year in college. I thought that the best quarterbacks in the NFL are the ones that are the most experienced, are the ones that have had the most starts, are the ones that have played football the longest. And reality with Dante Moore is he hasn't started a lot of games. He started at UCLA, and then he got benched, and then he came and sat behind Dylan Gabriel last year, and now he's starting. So he has some starts under his belt, certainly, but I think another year starting, specifically for Oregon, cannot hurt. And so that's what I thought that Dante Moore should have done, but he will enter the NFL draft, and he'll probably be the number 2 overall pick going to the Jets. And I'll say this, man, the Jets got to surround him with guys, because that organization, they struggle. That is the worst organization I've ever seen in football and maybe sports. And, man, Dante Moore, best of luck to you. Best of luck to the Jets organization, because I think they have pieces. Breece Hall, they've got Garrett Wilson, who's an incredible receiver. They've got the guys. They just got to get better organizationally. And so hopefully Dante Moore will be that extra piece. So Indiana 56, Oregon 22. Indiana will move on to the national championship where they'll go to Miami Hard Rock to play the U. What a game that'll be. I can't wait for that one. It'll be Monday, January 19th. Really two physical teams, two teams that don't make a lot of mistakes. This one, as I said, is probably going to be closer than people think. And it really comes down to who can make the least mistakes and who can make the biggest plays when they need them the most. We'll preview that game later on this week. We'll be back in midweek with NFL playoffs. We'll talk about that. Want to expand a little bit more into other sports, the NFL, the NBA, college basketball, stuff like that. So we'll be back this week talking about the divisional round of the playoffs, of the NFL playoffs, and then we'll be back after that predicting the college football playoff national championship. Folks, thank you so much for listening. As I said earlier, go ahead and share this with your friends and your family. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow on Instagram and Spotify. Rate and review us. That'd be greatly appreciated. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great week, and we'll be back later this week.